All right, guys, we're finally doing it. We are ranking all of the Star Wars movies from worst to best. Let's not spend any time on monkey business and let's just get this thing rolling. At number 11, we have Rise of Skywalker. I think this movie misses the mark on just about every way it could. That it features terrible writing, some of the worst characters we've seen in the series, worst plot holes, worst contrivances, worst everything. And don't even get me started on force healing and choreography. I'm going to rant about Rise of Skywalker in a different video, but this is just ranking, and so I'm trying to keep it brief, and so let's just keep this thing moving. Alright, coming in at number 10, we have The Force Awakens. This probably surprises many of you, as a lot of people actually like this movie as thinking it's the only good movie in the sequel trilogy. I, on the other hand, think it is the worst movie in the entire saga outside of course, Rise of Skywalker, because you can't do worse than Rise of Skywalker. I think the easiest thing to point out with this movie is that it features pretty much the exact same story that we see in A New Hope with very little differences. The writing is lazy, the characters aren't as interesting. It's just a rehash and cheap money, basically. It's a cash grab for Disney, and you know, fans will initially leave the theater happy, but once you get enough time to actually think about what you saw, you'll realize there's really nothing there of substance. Alright. Number 9, The Last Jedi. This is a lot of people's least favorite Star Wars movie. For me, it's bad. Like, definitively, it's bad. But, considering the other two, I just couldn't rank it any lower than this because while all of its ideas were bad, none of them landed, none of them worked, and none of them got carried over in future films, it has to be the best movie in the sequel trilogy by default, simply based off the fact that it tried to innovate. Did it work? No, not on any level. But it tried. I'll give it kudos for trying. It did. It really tried. A lot of its ideas, including Finn's arc, which was useless, Rose being introduced, I didn't like it. The whole thing of, the throne room scene was just awful and egregious. The way they handled Luke was terrible. Pretty much everything they did in this film was terrible, but they tried. Alright? I'm giving a participation trophy on this one. Alright, number 8. Solo: A Star Wars Story. I don't find this film to be particularly bad, like some people say. I just don't think it's particularly good either. Overall, I don't think this film is bad, it's just very forgettable. I honestly couldn't tell you most of the plot because I've seen it like once or twice and have never revisited it after that. And I think a big reason for this is that it didn't do anything to make us care more about Han Solo as a character. And he didn't really need an origin story anyway, as he's a character that we're better off knowing less about. And so I think their main issue with this movie was trying to do too much with this character and not just leaving it at where it was. Alright, number 7. Now we're starting to get into the ones that I actually do like. Alright, number 7 is Attack of the Clones. I think it's decent. I don't think it's a bad Star Wars movie by any means, but it is definitely the worst in the prequel trilogy. As a big prequels fan, I like the other two movies in this trilogy a lot, but I feel like this is definitely the weakest link. And the big piece of that is that a lot of it is focused around Anakin and Padme's love story, which, while I don't mind that dynamic initially, the way they did it was not very great. A lot of the dialogue was clunky. Hayden Christensen was kind of a creep. He was like an angsty teenager that also was horny. It was really weird how they characterized Anakin in this film, and I didn't particularly like. With that said, the story itself was pretty decent. I liked it. The introduction of Count Dooku was amazing. I really liked how they tried to intertwine everything together and set it up for the next movie, the finale of the series. I thought all that was decent. I just really didn't love a lot of the dialogue, and that's what really dragged this film down for me. Alright, number 6 is A New Hope. People are probably not going to like this one. Yeah, it is in the top half, but it's not particularly high. Not because I don't think it's a good movie. I do. I think it's a great movie. But compared to the other movies on this list, it just isn't good enough to be any higher than this. I've tried putting it higher. It just doesn't work. I like all the other movies on this list more. I think my main issue is that while the writing is very strong, while Luke as a character is very interesting. While we get to see Darth Vader and Darth Sidious and we have all this mystery, the main thing that drags this film down for me is the fight sequences and action sequences. The main issue, of course, being that lightsaber fights, especially, were underwhelming. Granted, we had never seen anything like this before at the time it came out in '78, but looking back, the Vader and Obi-Wan fight is an eyesore to watch. It just looks like two old men poking each other with sticks. And yeah, I understand people are going to be like, well, it was innovative at the time. And yeah, I agree with that. But the movie, while it was amazing and will always have a special place in my heart, it has not aged well at all. And for that reason, I couldn't put it any higher than this on the list. Number 5, The Phantom Menace. People are going to have some problems that I put this ahead of A New Hope. I know that. But I think this movie is a lot better than most people give it credit for. Sure, Jar Jar was something that probably didn't need to be there. I liked him personally, mainly because this was my favorite movie, Star Wars, when I was growing up, and so I really liked Jar Jar as a character. But I understand why a lot of people don't. He doesn't really have an important placement, and he's sort of just there as weird comic relief. Anakin is kind of a whiny little bitch, and it's annoying. However, with those things said, I think the story they told was very interesting, explaining how Obi-Wan, rose to the prestige he did with the Jedi Order, how he wasn't that gifted initially, but his determination always kept him going forward. We saw who his master was in Qui-Gon Jinn, and in the next movie, of course, we found out that his mentor was Count Dooku. And just it wasn't great on its own, but it set the stage for the future movies, and I think it did a really good job at doing that. I really liked seeing all these new characters, and I don't think I could go through this without talking about Duel of the Fates. Either the battle or the track. Both were immaculate. Not quite as good as what we saw, in the next two movies. But I think after the soundtracks we heard in Revenge of the Sith, this one is easily the second best. And so that is a big reason why I'm putting it here. Number 4 is Return of the Jedi. A lot of people consider this to be the weakest link in the original trilogy. I don't, though. And the main reason for that is because of the ending. While a lot of this movie, granted, doesn't really do a whole lot new, the Vader and Luke fight at the end in the new Death Star is probably one of the most emotionally heartfelt moments I have ever seen in a movie. I've had that in Interstellar before, I've had that in Revenge of the Sith before, and outside of that, I've never really experienced the emotion that I did in that duel. Between everything Vader said, Luke's reaction, the music playing in the background, it was all perfect. And that is why this is better, in my opinion, than A New Hope. Number 3, Empire. Empire Strikes Back was just a great film. It was the perfect way to do a sequel for a film. And I think this really led to what Star Wars is today. If this movie wasn't as good as the original one, I don't think it ever would have gone as far as it did. But because it was so phenomenal, this allows Star Wars to go through this huge phase that it did and get all these huge fans and huge fan bases because Empire was just that good. I'm not going to go into detail about why it's so good. Everyone knows that already. This is the only film on the entire list that everyone can unanimously agree is amazing. Alright, number 2. I know this one is going to get some people riled up. But I think I have to say this spot goes to Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. I know there's a lot of people that do not feel the same way as me about this movie. There's lots of people that think it's boring. Lots of people that think it was dumb to kill off all the characters. But I really like this movie. It wouldn't have made sense if they didn't kill everyone at the end because we don't see these characters in future movies. It wouldn't have made any sense why these people aren't in any of the movies in the original trilogy when they were such an important part of that galaxy far, far away. It was a bold choice, yes, but it was a good choice. This was the only time I've ever seen Disney not shy away from killing characters just because it would have consequences. It's the only time I've seen Disney actually care about the integrity of the Star Wars universe, and I think it deserves kudos for that. This is the only movie Disney has put out so far that I actually greatly enjoyed. And so for that, I think it needs to go on the spot. It's also incredibly dark, which is another bold choice because Star Wars is generally meant for kids. But this movie is not meant for kids by any stretch of the imagination. It is incredibly sad, and that is why it is so good. All right, number one. There's going to be lots of people that hate it and lots of people that love it. I'm going Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith is, in my opinion, the perfect Star Wars movie. You have great characters, great writing, great twist, and one of, if not the greatest cinematic fights I have ever seen in any film ever. The Battle of Heroes tracked both the song and the duel itself perfect. I have no notes. Sure, some of the dialogue in this film wasn't great, but the writing was amazing, the characters were portrayed perfectly, and the story itself was immaculate. This movie will always hold a special place in my heart just because of how good it was, just because of how innovative it was, just because it was the first movie in the series that truly did not care if young people were not the target audience. It targeted people who had strong emotional connections to these characters and who were old enough to handle the darker themes that this movie had. This is, in my opinion, easily the darkest movie ever made in Star Wars, and for a reason. They needed to connect everything together, they needed to do it in a way that made sense, and they did it perfectly. Alright, that's about all I got for you guys today. In the comments, don't feel afraid to tell me your list. I'm happy to hear everyone's lists. I think it's great to have insight, to hear opinions from people that don't necessarily have the same thoughts as you, that don't necessarily have the same opinions. That's something we really lack in today's society. And with that, I'm going to say, please help the channel, like and subscribe if you feel like, you like me, and if you don't, well, I guess. That's about all I have for you guys today. Thanks so much for watching.